So welcome everybody to our webinar Wednesday series. My name is Wendy Fracchia. I'm the operations manager with Murdock Escorted Tours, and we're so glad that you are joining us today, or maybe at some point you'll be watching this on YouTube. We are very excited to have with us today Michael Phillips, who is one of our wonderful long time, I should say, tour host. And I'm going to let Michael introduce a little bit about himself and his background, because he is just a wonder of knowledge and information, especially about the arts and the areas that we love to learn about in Italy. So today's webinar presentation is going to be focused around three of the most major sites visited in Italy, which is Venice, Florence, and Rome. And with them being the top three, we have got a tour that Michael's hosting. I've been lucky enough to go on this tour. It's absolutely one of my most favorite memories, called The Splendors of Italy. And so I am so excited to see your presentation, Michael. If you would just take a second and maybe do just a brief introduction about yourself, and maybe what about this tour you love and you're excited about sharing. I think that would be really fun.
Yeah, happy to. So welcome everybody. Glad to have you on. I recognize a couple of names of people who are signed up and are coming with us. So really excited about that. My background is as an academic before I went into the consulting world. I have a PhD from the University of Chicago and was a professor at BYU, Brigham Young University in Provo, Utah for many years. It was there at BYU teaching general humanities classes and doing intro to the arts classes that I kind of cooked up this scheme. I said, if I could do anything I wanted as a professor, what I'd do is give the lecture and then take the students to the actual site. That would be my dream class. And at that same time at BYU, we did have an organization called Alumni Travel, where it wasn't students, but alumni of the university wanted to travel with professors. And that's how I became involved in kind of leading and hosting tours, was through BYU's Alumni Travel organization. When BYU kind of sharpened its mission and decided that was something that shouldn't be on campus anymore, that group kind of moved away and eventually ended up at Morris Murdock. And so I was thinking this morning as I was preparing for today, I started leading these types of tours in the 20th century, and I'm happy to be doing it in the 21st century. And of course, Italy is one of the places that I dearly love, and probably for the very reasons that Wendy started talking about. Not only are these one of the three most important cities in Italy, these are three of the most important cities and probably among the most visited cities in the world. In fact, I looked at a top 10 some time ago of most visited cities in the world, and these three cities are all in the top 10. Now, beyond that, what's really interesting is I love looking at the list of the UNESCO World Heritage Sites, and there are about 1,200 World Heritage Sites, and the country with the most World Heritage Sites is Italy. Second place is China. This little tiny country, Italy, has 58 World Heritage Sites. That gets even more interesting.
Yeah.
All of the sites that we're going to are World Heritage Sites. Every single place on this tour is a World Heritage Site. And some of them are not just specific buildings. Some of them are things like the historic center of Rome, the historic center of Florence, the historic center of San Gimignano, the historic center of Siena. Then you get something as big as Venice and its lagoon, the Miracle Square of Pisa, all of the early Christian monuments of Ravenna, all of Pompeii. So this tour is just going from one place that has been deemed by UNESCO as the most culturally important sites in the world. Now, it becomes even more important for those of us whose heritage completely flows out of Western Europe. And in fact, the other day, someone was joking, I was out to lunch with someone and we were eating Italian, and they said, how is it that this little tiny country has granted us so much of our culinary history? Italy just is so important that way. And so I think that's one of the things that makes this tour really exciting for me. I kind of took an itinerary that's been used before. And I told Wendy, I'll do this tour, but you got to make these 10 changes. Wendy knows I'll never do a tour the way it's been done by someone else. So we added in a whole bunch of extra little pieces that are things that are important to me and I think are important for kind of the tour overall. We're going in October. The weather is always better. Italy can be brutally hot. I was there this past year in early June, which is usually not bad, but we had just brutally hot days. So by October, the crowds have thinned a little bit. The weather has moderated, which will make all of this really nice. It goes from October 14th to the 25th. So you can see it's about an 11-day tour, but we just pack in so much in those 11 days. So let me kind of walk you through the way the tour is designed. First of all, let's be honest, the best splendor of all of Italy is gelato. And my wife and son and I this last summer, we ate gelato everywhere. We had so much fun having gelato because I'm such a huge fan and I'm always looking for these certain flavors. And I found this little picture that I loved, especially because that's the Ponte Vecchio in Florence in the middle of the picture with the gelato cones in front of it. We'll see gelato everywhere. And I love how elaborate, this one's not terribly elaborate, but how elaborate some of the displays are as you go and choose your gelato.
What's your favorite gelato, Michael? I gotta know.
Well, I'm always searching for the mysterious blood orange gelato, which I adore, but it's very hard to find. The gelato industry has consolidated quite a bit in Italy, and the same companies own a lot. It used to be separate little shops, and that's really changed over the last 20 years or so. But this was a unique experience we had this summer in Milan, which is not on our tour, but this is my youngest son who was traveling with me last year. And the man in the background was a gelato artist, and he would take the gelato and whip it until it got soft. Then you can see on this cone, he'd put it in the cone and swirl it, and then take the next flavor and swirl it, and then do little things on the top. Now, this is really beautiful, except as I said, the day was about 100 degrees, and the gelato starts melting real fast, as you can see on the bottom of that cone. But I love me some gelato.
How fast can you eat that gelato?
You gotta eat it fast. You gotta lick from the bottom. That's the whole trick, right? So what we're going to do on this tour is it's going to be based on these three wonderful cities. And the first is Venice. And Venice is known by many, many different names. One of my favorites is Queen of the Seas, or La Serenissima, the most serene. And we'll go see this incredible city that is so unique and so foundational in terms of kind of arts and cultures. And so many of the places that we'll be going were incredibly wealthy very early on in the late medieval period, moving into kind of the Renaissance and beyond. Venice, in large measure, because it was a port city, and trade was coming in and out of the city. And so through taxation, it was a very, very wealthy place. And in a couple of the different cities that we go to, we're going to see these incredibly important bridges. So this is a wonderful picture of the Rialto Bridge, which is the biggest bridge in Venice. And it goes over the Grand Canal. Most of the canals are quite small. The Grand Canal is huge. And so all of those little archways that you see up above have shops in them. And at one point, they were very, very exclusive shops. The Rialto Bridge now, it's a little bit more touristic. They're kind of touristic shops. And there's a lot of restaurants kind of down on the banks of the river down below. And that's a place I always like to go eat lunch, sit on the banks of the Grand Canal and have lunch. It feels very Italian, especially if you have pizza or pasta, which are basically your options anyway. So here's the wonderful Grand Canal. Here is a view that I love of St. Mark's Square, because all the way in the back, you see St. Mark's Basilica, and there's the bell tower, the Campanile. And beyond that are some other important sites that we'll see, but it's rare to see the square like this completely empty. Something had to be going on when this picture was taken. Another thing that definitely happens, and we are probably going to run into some of it in October, you never know, but high tide, for all the money they've spent trying to control the tides around Venice, we may well see something like this where the square has water in it. And they put up raised walkways all around the square for us to walk on. And so that's something that we'll have a chance to see. Now, this St. Mark's Basilica we'll have a chance to go inside of, and it's a Byzantine basilica that's just fascinating. The amount of gold in all of the detail work inside is kind of mind-boggling. And you can even see it's got some of the Byzantine design with the kind of the more Greek cross plan and the domed churches as well. And we'll look at one of these fabulous frescoes here on, not frescoes, sorry, these are all done in mosaic. One of the mosaics tells the story of how they got St. Mark's body back to have it be part of the reliquary of the place. And that is, it was in Africa in a Muslim country. And so they packed it underneath pork. And so none of the Muslims would have anything to do with it. And they were able to move the body back. And that is completely commemorated in one of the mosaics here in the top of the church, which tells these wonderful stories.
Wow.
Okay, then as we spend time there, we'll also be able to go into the Doge's Palace, which was the Prince Archbishop's wonderful place. We'll also be able to do a little bit of shopping, but we won't just do some shopping. We'll actually go out to some of the islands where certain things are created. We'll go out and see the Murano glass, and that's on the island of Murano, one of the small islands of Venice. And there's the very traditional kind of Venetian glass in the dark colors with a lot of gold detail. And then they do jewelry as well. And then they do a lot of kind of very modern work as well. And this is one of my favorites, always the scenes of the birds. And we'll go and have a demonstration of the glass blowing. We'll go to a neighboring island of Murano, one called Burano. And Burano is fascinating because the houses are all painted bright colors, and it's the home of a lot of lace production. So we'll see the glass, we'll see the lace, we'll spend time, we'll have a meal actually in Venice itself. We'll go to the Doge's Palace, we'll see the inside of St. Mark's. You'll have free time for shopping and exploring, head up the Campanile if you wish. And then we will have an evening gondola ride. We will go and we will board the gondolas and go down the canals and have a chance to see the city that way. And it is really marvelous because you see the changes in the water levels over time, and you'll see how the first floors of the houses have now become full of water. And so it's the second floor, and they've rebuilt the steps. Another bridge that we'll see, I don't know that we'll go under it in our gondolas, is the Bridge of Sighs, the very famous Bridge of Sighs, which was the passageway for the convicted. Those who were convicted in the courts in the Doge's Palace, which is on the left, they would then pass through the Bridge of Sighs, and it's called that because they would sigh as they headed to prison, which is the building on the right. And there is lots of tradition about if you kiss at sunset under the Bridge of Sighs, your love will last forever, because of course, love associated with dying prisoners, that's very all right. My wife put this slide together for me. She'll be traveling with us as well. One of the things that she loves in Venice are the doorways and the spectacular knockers. And we'll see those again in Florence. But you can see here how the water level has come up and these become unusable doorways. And so the windowways, the doorways, the knockers, there's just wonderful things to look at everywhere we go, all of the fine detail throughout the entire city. As we leave Venice, I'm really excited. We'll be going to the little city of Ravenna. And this is one that I wanted to add into the tour for a very selfish reason. I taught about these mosaics for 20 years as a college professor and as a lecturer in art history, and I've never seen them. So we're going to go see the mosaics of Ravenna, which are late Byzantine, and they're spectacular. We'll go into a church area, and this is in the tomb area of the Galla Placidia and all of this church. You'll see everything's based on the Greek cross plan. So we're moving from kind of late Byzantine moving towards Renaissance, because Renaissance gave up mosaic and went to fresco. But there's something about mosaic, these little tesserae, that's each little piece, and the way it's laid in, and it's never meant to be smooth. Each piece is meant to be at an angle, because you didn't have electric lighting. You had either lighting by candle, or most of them are built where there'd be some sunlight high in the building, and it comes in and it reflects off the tesserae at angles, and everything shimmers, and it's just fantastic. These are thought of as kind of some of the best in the world. We'll continue on to Florence. And Florence is known as kind of the birthplace of the Renaissance. This is the famous Duomo of Florence. And the small building that you see in front of the tower there on the left-hand side, right here, this is the famous baptistry, where we'll see the Gates of Paradise by Ghiberti. And they were given that name by Michelangelo because when he saw them, he said, indeed, these are the Gates of Paradise. But this dome itself is quite spectacular, designed by Brunelleschi in a competition to build the dome. And we'll be able to go into the church, and you'll see it's all faced with white, green, and rose marble. And we'll see that throughout this part of Italy, the use of white, green, and rose marble. And it's really a spectacular building. If you have time and you've got the legs for it, you can pay a little extra. The inner dome is much lower than the outer dome, and you can pay to go up and crawl across the inner dome inside of the dome itself. You can see, kind of get some scale. You see these people up here on the cupola, where you have really a beautiful view because it's the tallest thing in all of Florence. These are the famous Gates of Paradise in this quatrefoil panels, a work that took Ghiberti and his shop many, many years to do on the baptistry, because the procession in the cathedral was quite a wonderful thing. You needed to be baptized, but you were baptized in a building outside of the cathedral itself. Once you were baptized, you could then enter the cathedral. When you entered the cathedral, you walked down the nave and you walked all the way down to where the transept happens, and that forms the famous Latin cross, and it would be right past that. The altar would be there and the choir, and this is how you go through your spiritual progression. So that sounds, I think, familiar to a lot of us in different kind of Christian traditions. Baptism is the entryway, and then you continue, and then you participate in the mass or whatever it might be. So we'll see that in a lot of these churches we go to. Very, very visible in the setup of this great Duomo. We will also visit what is my favorite single art museum in the whole world, the Uffizi Gallery. Uffizi in Italian is office. This was the office building of the Medici family. And part of the reason that Florence is so wealthy is because the Medici family were bankers to the Pope, bankers to the church. As they began to be wealthy, they became patrons of the arts, including people like Michelangelo. And then we'll also see some wonderful works in the gallery by other very important people. So we see the birth of Venus in the Botticelli room. This is actually a Michelangelo painting. He didn't do a lot that weren't frescoes. He thought of himself as a sculptor, and he designed this frame. The frame is marvelously interesting. And then there is this incredible painting of the Holy Family. But as you look at it, you go, that whole painting is a study for sculpture. He wasn't even interested in the painting part. He was doing a sculptural study because he really deemed himself a sculptor first and foremost. You'll see modern art taking place in Florence. This is just a wonderful, when we were there last summer, this guy was doing this on the sidewalk. He finished it, and then there was a marvelous rainstorm and it was gone. But you'll see all this type of thing in Florence. It's just a vibrant and wonderful city, heavily touristic. We do have to be dropped off kind of around the fringes of the inner city and then walk. The walking is pretty smooth and easy, and with it being October, it won't be too bad. One of the things, of course, that we'll see is Michelangelo's David. I'll have a lot to say about this, but the most important thing is it's made of this beautiful white Carrara marble. And we're going to see lots of things carved of beautiful white Carrara marble. And that will set us up for kind of a wonderful moment in our tour. There are Davids all over, and there are foolish people who pose like David under the statues. This one, of course, is the original. These that you see outside and other places, because David is kind of the symbol of the city, are all replicas. It was in a town nearby that the story of Pinocchio was written. And so you'll see Pinocchios everywhere. We've bought them as Christmas presents for our friends. I love Pinocchios. I know one really wonderful shop we can go to where he has bigger ones and things if you like Pinocchios. I bought quite a large one this last year that we really like. Leather goods. Florence is known for all of its leather goods, purses, these books, all sorts of wonderful things. Now, as we leave Florence, we're going to do something really incredible. We're going to go up to the Carrara Marble Quarry, where the very stones used to make the David, and a very important sculpture that we'll see at the end of our tour, the Pietà, where all of this stone came from. And we'll go up in four-wheelers and get to actually experience the quarries themselves. So I'm very excited. I've never gone up and done this. I've driven by the quarries, gone and seen them, and never actually gotten into them. So that'll be a wonderful moment in our tour. We will make a stop in the beautiful city of Pisa. Here is my beautiful co-tour guide, my wife, holding up the Leaning Tower, and we'll have a wonderful moment here in the beautiful Square of Miracles. And again, this is just the bell tower. We'll see the baptistry, we'll see the cathedral, very much in the setup of the other churches that we've seen in Florence. But this is just a delightful and wonderful place to go.
I was just going to say, I think I had more fun in the square watching people pose and do all the different things with the tower. It was just hysterical. You could just sit back and you could watch it from every angle. It was the best people watching.
Yeah, and what was funny, we had a very good photographer on the tour with us, and he said, the mistake every photographer makes is they keep moving their subject. He says, just get them posed, and then it's the photographer who should move. And he took great pictures, so I love this one. We'll hit San Gimignano on a short stop as we're moving. We won't stay there. But San Gimignano is known as the city of 100 towers. It is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The town is filled with towers. And they're so funny. If you tell someone in San Gimignano that you're going to go see the Leaning Tower, they'll say, what? We got 50 of them. We got 50. What, you're going to see one? We got 50 leaning towers. Don't be stupid. So San Gimignano, beautiful, beautiful part of Tuscany that we'll have a visit to. And then Siena. Again, you see this rose and white and green on the beautiful church in Siena. It's known as kind of a red-roofed town. We'll make a stop there. It's a beautiful, beautiful place. The small walking streets of Siena are so beautiful, and their use of kind of the mustards and the ombre colors, it's just fantastic. Then we'll make our way, of course, to Rome, the eternal city. And look at this view, just looking out at the churches and the towers, and people always want to know about this one because it looks so ancient and wonderful. This was actually a civic building built during the time of Mussolini. So you get something even from the 30s, but that looks very classical. It is amazing the way things have been preserved in the city. A lot of research recently about their concrete and their cement and how they did it and why it survives so much better than ours. We can talk a little bit about that as we travel. One of the lines that I love about Rome is no success in life compensates for the failure to go to Rome. For all of you who that may be a little bit like another quote you've heard in your life, we will have a chance to go and visit the whole forum. We'll walk through it. If you look all the way back here, that's the Colosseum. And I think the way we'll do things is we'll start over at the Colosseum and have a tour, and then walk through the forum, these wonderful ruins that remain, and make our way and kind of come out the other side. That's the way I really like to approach those ruins and that area. Here's the Colosseum. The interior is just so spectacularly interesting. These areas down below were used, that's where animals were housed for things, but so much could be done with it. We know through written record that it could be flooded, and they would stage naval battles inside the Colosseum. And it's just a phenomenal place. And the fact that it's still standing 2,000 years later in the condition that it's in is just almost too much to believe. This is my favorite single building in all of Rome. This is the Pantheon, and the Pantheon, kind of the church to all the gods, made with a lot of pre-existing material that came from other places and from other buildings. That was a real tradition among the Romans to use other stuff. But this building is a perfect sphere sitting on top of a barrel. And inside, it has no support. It just has this wonderful open eye at the top called the oculus that lets in light. It's still a practicing church. We'll go in and be able to look around, but very often there are services going on and we have to be quite quiet. It's in a wonderful square in the old city. Not far away is the beautiful Trevi Fountain. It's recently been cleaned and redone, and it looks fantastic. So we'll have a chance to see the Trevi Fountain as we're in the downtown area of old Rome. We will have a chance to go to the new temple of the LDS Church for those who would like to, and there'll be time for a session for those who would like to do that as well. And some of our dear friends from here in our home ward in Provo are the current president and matron of the temple. So we're going to see if maybe we can line up a little something special when we're there at the temple. It's got a beautiful visitor center. This is not an actual picture, but it was a drawing when they first did things. Over here, you've got a wonderful visitor center. You've got patron housing, the temple, and then over here is a stake center. So we'll have time there to see everything, see the visitor center. And for those who would like to do a session of the temple, they can do that. This is in the visitor center. They've done replicas of the Torvald's son, Christus, and then they have done the original 12 apostles in the background as well.
All
Okay.
that marble also came from Carrara.
That all of it came from Carrara, and in fact, all of the light fixtures in the temple were done at Murano. So they tried to really use Italian motifs and materials throughout the temple. There's wonderful shopping in Rome, markets with everything from food to art. And then I love this picture because it's the road that leads up to the Spanish Steps. These are the famous Spanish Steps. And then here you look and you see all these very expensive boutiques on the road. This is where a crazy guy from Saudi drove his Maserati down the steps this last summer. It got stuck, it damaged the steps, and he just left it and went away. They found him, but just left his Maserati on the steps. Bad tourists really were not good in Europe last year. It was a very bad year for tourists. Lots of really fine shopping, but then street markets as well, where you can get much better deals on things, everything from shoes and ceramics to other types of leatherware. Of course, your day would not be complete in Rome without a little additional gelato. We will make a day trip from Rome. So we're only staying in 3 hotels, which is another really nice thing about this tour. We'll make a day trip to Pompeii. And Pompeii is just so spectacular because it was buried in ash from an explosion of Mount Vesuvius that you see here in the background. It was just absolutely frozen in time. And as they've excavated, and they've excavated less than 1/4 of it, what you see underneath is just in incredibly good condition. We'll have a chance to spend some time in Pompeii. Kind of a dramatic picture with the eruption of Mount Vesuvius. One of the things is they started excavating, they started running into voids or hollows. And thankfully, there were a couple of smart kind of archaeologists involved with that. And they said, we got to stop. And when we do some kind of radar work and other things, when we see that there's a hollow, we're going to pump it full of plaster of Paris. And they started doing that. And what they found, where there'd been organic material like a human body, it had disappeared, but they were able to pump all of this plaster of Paris in. And so you get figures that were clearly trying to escape the heat and the gases and everything that happened. And so you have these in various places in town throughout Pompeii, and then of course nearby in Naples. We won't spend any time in Naples, where they've got a couple of museums as well, but it's just incredible. And I mean, look at the ceramics that they're pulling out. Most people are happy when they find a shard of ceramic. Here they are finding the entire amphora in whole condition. Just amazing. We'll come back to Rome, and then we'll spend some time in the Vatican City. And of course, the Vatican City is one of the smallest countries in the world. It is an independent country where the Pope sits. And this is a view of St. Mark's Square, a massive square. To give you some idea of scale, these are chairs that are set up. I think this was taken on a day that they were going to beatify some saints. And then you see the people, and you see just the size of this looking down from the roof of St. Peter's, the biggest church in all of Catholicism. But here you see kind of the size of all of what surrounds St. Mark's. And of course, one of the things that we'll do after seeing some of the really incredible treasures of the Vatican Museum, we'll make our way down to the Sistine Chapel. And for the first probably 20 years that I visited the Sistine Chapel, it was always covered with scaffolding and being cleaned. And it was about 15 years ago that this major cleaning and restoration was finally done. And the colors are so vivid. They were so dark because of smoke over the years that people didn't realize how pastel the palette was that Michelangelo was using. So we'll see his wonderful back wall, which is the final judgment. And here you have the figure of Christ and those who are on his right and left hand. And then, of course, the very well-known Sistine Chapel ceiling, where we, of course, have as a centerpiece the creation of Adam. And maybe this is the most important moment in all of Christian art of the Renaissance, is this moment that life comes into Adam from God. Now, it is the Sistine Chapel that they use when they name a new pope. And I'll hopefully point out for you a little kind of heater in the corner of it, an old stove. And that is the cardinals go in and the doors are locked. And when they burn their ballots in this little stove, and it sends up black smoke. When they finally elect a new pope, they put their ballots in, and they put in a little chemical that makes the smoke white. And when they see the white, then the workers there in the Vatican come and unlock the doors and let all of the cardinals come out, and a new pope is named. So that is kind of the significance in Catholicism of the Sistine Chapel. Sistine comes from it being the chapel that was commissioned by Pope Sixtus, and then of course Michelangelo worked on it. Kind of to bring things full circle, and these various areas we're going to see have these amazing connections. So Pompeii, it was the rediscovery of some of the sculptures that we saw in Pompeii and Herculaneum that really brought about the Renaissance, because people saw artistic ways of working that had been lost throughout the Middle Ages. But we will see this work in St. Peter's. This is Michelangelo's Pietà. It's his only signed sculpture. He did it when he was 26 years old, and he heard people talking about it after he finished it, and they were attributing it to other sculptors. So Mary has a sash running across her gown, and he came back and he sculpted into that sash, "I, Michelangelo, made this." He was known to be a bit of a hard character, a little angry, a little narcissistic, but I love that he came in and did this. "I, Michelangelo, made this." And so we'll see that as we go into St. Peter's Basilica. We'll, of course, make sure we don't end things without another visit, have just a little bit of gelato, but that is our trip. Sorry, I went a little longer than I intended to. I get going. Sorry, Wendy.
No, it's there's nothing to be sorry about, because I mean, your pictures, I just had to sit there and look at them, because all of them were so wonderful, and some wonderful perspectives in different places. And there's so many wonderful things about the tour. I think one of the things I was going to point out, because Italy is an easy place to travel on your own. It is, like you said, one of the top 10 places. Normally it's in the top 3, if not the number 1 place in the world that people visit every year, because of the history, the culture, the food, all of it, the religious background. There's so much to it. It's just, you can find just about everything there. And while it is an easy place to visit on your own, I hope that people can appreciate what it's like to visit with somebody with your background and knowledge. And I'll tell you one of the big challenges that we're having this year, and this is a post-pandemic issue across the world, but when the world shut down and people were told they couldn't travel, as soon as they could travel again, they came in droves. And when I say droves, that is not being an overwhelming term. This year, especially in Italy, things are being booked at an astonishing rate, and people are finding it very difficult to get tickets into the Colosseum or into the Vatican. Or you can get into the Vatican, but you can't get into St. Peter's. It's these things that we used to take for granted before the pandemic, that right now it is definitely an advantage to being with a group. Matter of fact, the first time I went to the Vatican, we had just ended a Mediterranean cruise, and we were on our own, and we just thought we would go to the Vatican. Well, we had a 2.5-hour line, to get into the Vatican. And so somebody was walking around with these, hey, join our tour, and it's only €5 more than paying it direct. And we thought that was a great deal. So we jumped the line, we paid our euro, we got to go in. And then this is the funny end of the story. Halfway through our tour of the Vatican, our tour guide got chased out of the Vatican because he was not a properly licensed guide, which is one of the things that you find in Italy and a lot of places in the world, is you have to be a specialty licensed guide to go into these different areas. So again, that's a benefit to being with a group. And again, it is fun to be able to go and explore on your own when you have your free time. Highly, highly encourage you to go out and do that, because Italy is definitely a place. There's nothing better than finding that restaurant that you can just sit down in a piazza. and just people watch and have some pasta and, drink your water with gas if you're not gonna, or whatever the situation is. But if you haven't been to Italy before, it is just all senses are firing. And if you've been to Italy before, I guarantee you want to go back, because it has honestly become one of my most favorite places in the world. And it used to be Rome. And actually, as much as I love Rome, so much of the rest of the country now has piqued my interest. I will never forget my first visit to Florence, and just being blown away by everything on every corner. So it truly is. And I appreciated how much background you gave onto the different things, and things that I've been on tours with different directors, and I haven't heard some of those facts before. So I thought that was really fantastic. If you are going to Italy on your own, I hope you're working with a travel advisor, because they can absolutely help with things. If you are looking at going with a tour, Michael's tour still has a few spots available. I don't know, because of your busy schedule, Michael, if when we're going to get you on the schedule to do an Italy tour again.
So, yeah, I suspect I won't be, having done Italy 2 years in a row, we'll be on to some other things. But this is, for me, the way to hit Italy in a 10 or 11 day period. Hit these 3 cities. The days are designed so that you have time to do cultural things with our guides. You have some free time. We'll help make sure you do things that you really enjoy. But we just, my wife and I love Italy. We love Europe as a whole. But this is probably the last time we'll do Italy for a few years, I would imagine. So
good
to have people along with us.
One thing I just wanted to maybe highlight, again, whether you're on a tour or doing this on your own, Italy is a walking country. Like Michael mentioned, when you're in Florence, they drop you on the outskirts of the old area, and you have to walk in to the museums and to the Accademia and to the Duomo and to these areas, because buses can't go in there. You have to be able to walk. And this honestly is one of those tours where people say, is there a lot of walking? And we just have to say, in all honesty, yes. This is a 18 to 25,000 steps a day experience, because of everything we're going to see and do. And so it's uneven, it's cobblestones, it is not wheelchair friendly. We tried to do my mother in a wheelchair just in Rome before a cruise once, and we bent those tires so badly, just trying to take her through the old city. And the wheelchair couldn't be used for the rest of the trip because it was just a big wobble the whole time. But I guess the quality of your wheelchair. One thing, just to make people be aware that this is a walking tour. You're going to find that in Venice. You've probably heard Venice is all water taxi. There are no buses. There's no streets. It is just walking. And in the old city of Rome, it is the same as well. So all the towns are just amazing. And we hope that if Italy is on your bucket list, that again, you're working with a professional who can help you see it and make the very most of all your time. So Michael, thank you so much. I'm going to ask right now, if anybody has any specific questions, you can go ahead and unmute. We'll take just a couple of seconds and see if we can answer a couple of questions.
Ask away, anything at all. We are just happy to talk about.
Is October a rainy season?
It's not. I mean, rain's always a possibility, but that is not a rainy season in Italy.
Okay, good.
Yeah, like you said, it's always a possibility. When I was there, I was actually there in the spring, and we did our first day, we had one of those torrential downpours. And like you said, Michael, they had to put the platforms up to walk on. And I thought that was the most ingenious thing I'd ever seen. But because of the water levels that they're used to the flooding coming in just from the water levels that they're surrounded by on this island. So
The very first time I took my oldest son was in the summer, and there was a very high tide, and we took off our shoes and socks, tied the laces up over our shoulders, rolled up our pant legs, and we explored Venice barefoot. It was probably the most unhealthy, dangerous thing in the world to do, but we had a ball.
I was gonna say, you do what you gotta do, and that's the best part of it, so. But again, thank you, everybody, for spending a little bit of time with us. Michael, thank you for talking us through the tour. Does Rome have temple clothing to rent? You know what, actually, that is a question that we get quite often, and this is the answer. Yes, they do rent temple clothing. Now, they ask that if you are going, that you bring your own ceremonial packet. And the other thing that I will add is they are very limited on their clothing. We had a tour director who was a very tall, slender man, and he ended up with a pair of pants that were 6 inches too big in the waist and 6 inches too short in the length. And it worked. He was able to do a session, but you are definitely at the mercy of what they have to rent. So just remember, it is a new temple. It is a small temple. It is a temple that is meant for visitors. It's a little bit like the Nauvoo temple that way, that it was not meant for the mass population of faithful members in this area, but it is a symbolic temple. And so, yes, you can rent your own clothing, but if you are on a tour, you will be prepared on what you do need to bring. We know with packing, this is a big deal too, so. All right, everybody. Well, again, thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to hopefully having you on a tour or seeing you on tour at some point, and safe travels. Thank you again so much for Michael and for everybody watching.
Thanks, everybody.